Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Guns of Infinity. So, in the last episode, we had some interesting conversations with the Lady Wells. We managed to turn around and kind of espouse our virtues as far as we go with the whole, should women be in combat or should women start taking leadership roles and things like that. And the early seeds of that are starting to kind of get its way throughout the kingdom and stuff like that. So, that'll be interesting to see how that progresses as the game goes along. And also, though, we had some rather sad news at the end of the chapter. We had to deal with the death of our father. So, our mother just turned around and sent us a letter, of course, letting us know about his death. So, now we are the Lord of Roomberg now. So, that's something else that we'll have to turn around and deal with. And that is exactly where we'll pick up with here in this episode. So, moving forward, we've already read the letter. Slowly, carefully, you fold up the letter again and slide it back into the pocket of your jacket as Thunderer shifts underneath your saddle. You don't know how many times you've read the travel weathered sentences on that one piece of paper in the 2.5 days it's taken the king's forces to march north to Lenoble, but its words have been etched into your mind. Through the long hours of riding flank guard for the long, ponderous columns of line infantry, you've been able to think of little else. Sir, an unfamiliar voice says from behind you, are you all right? I'm not all right. My grief over my father's death is all but incapacitating. My sorrow is great, but I might still do my duty. I shall be fine as soon as I get my mind of my father's death. I shall be all right, having accepted that all men must die. I'm quite well now that I am free of that miserable scoundrel. Of course, we can't say that because we were on good terms with our father. So we'll just say um, I'm not at all. I'm not all right at all. My grief over my father's death is all but incapacitating because we did love our father quite a bit. You would like nothing more than to sit in a corner of some dark room, draw your legs up to your belly, and weep. Perhaps the tears would fill the hole in your spirit where your father had once been. Perhaps they would purge you of the shock which has left you so fatigued and listless these past few days. Yet showing such indiscipline as to give in to your own feelings is something which you cannot do. You are a gentleman of the blood, and more than that, you are a king's officer. Your men look to you for strength and assurance. The last thing you can do is lay bare the extent of your weakness. The tears stay unshed, and your expression is made calm. Your duty demands it. Yes, I'm quite all right, you reply, your words leaden and hollow. You turn in your saddle to see the source of the intrusion, a young man in the white and blue of the Lancers, Lieutenant's pips fresh on his collar. His Majesty's compliments, sir, he reports as he offers you a crisp salute, one that you quickly return. His fingers reach into the jacket to hand you a piece of folded paper. Your battle orders, sir. With one hand, you take your fresh orders as you keep the reins in the other. Your thumb flicks open the wax seal with a practiced motion. Thank you, Lieutenant, you murmur as you begin to read on. Mean to read. Carry on. You barely notice the Lancer as he spurs his horse away. Images of the king's plan take shape in your mind as you read through the short, terse words outlining your duty. Thoughts of the battle to come push the lingering sentiments of your father from your mind. Today, you will have rather more pressing concerns. The challenge we face today is a simple one, gentlemen. You announce to your officers as you lead your squadron off the road and into your position on the right flank of the army's formation. That is to say, an easy one. The nature of that challenge is displayed in open daylight before your eyes. 800 paces before you, beyond the stretch of open ground, lies the remains of a vast camp. Corbirit and his mighty army stayed there for nearly 2 years. Now, out of the vast arrays of tents and pavilions, only a small fraction remain. A skeleton of a camp to serve the skeleton of an army that Prince Corbett left behind to guard his route of supply. It is estimated that the enemy numbers 3 to 4,000, you continue, gesturing at the dark figures huddled in the shadow of the bare earthworks which surrounded the emptiness of the mostly abandoned camp. They've little cavalry and no artillery. I doubt they will give us much trouble. In any case, the line infantry and the lancers will be the ones to see them off. we have a rather different job. Your hand shifts no longer. Your hand shifts, no longer pointing at the enemy or their camp beyond, where the river Karen flows swift in the blue before the outskirts of the town of Lenovo. Your finger, your finger homes in on a series of low rectangular shapes, moored to a makeshift dock on the near bank. Barges, not the proper river barges so common on Tierran rivers, but flat bottomed ferries moored to a line, each one loaded down with cargo heavy enough to make the ungainly craft sit low in the water. Those barges are our objective, you explained. While the main body of our forces tie up the majority of the Antari, we are to pierce the enemy's defenses at their extreme flank. The king wants whatever is on those barges intact if possible, destroyed if necessary. We shall have to move swiftly then, Blaylock notes. If this cargo is as valuable as it seems to be, the enemy will seek to deny it to us the moment we show any sign of getting our hands on it. I'm rather more concerned with holding the ferry barges, Sandero replies. We shall be behind the main body of the enemy, and while our force as a whole outnumbers them, even a quarter could easily overwhelm us. The Lancers will be riding to support us as soon as they break through the enemy on our left, you answer. We shall not be isolated for long. Their orders explain, and with all pressing matters addressed, you can do nothing but send your subordinates to their respective commands and make your last-minute preparations for battle. Again, I don't want to draw any attention to myself when it comes to battle, so I will do no armor. Not 10 minutes later, the battle opens with the rolling thunder of cannon. To your left, the 36 artillery pieces of the king's division roar one by one, hurling smoke and fire and solid iron at the distant shapes of the enemy. Even from 800 paces away, you can see the great gouts of earth spray upwards as cannonballs skip off the sloped frontage of the Antari trenches. Round shot is an ineffective weapon against earthwork, but it is a weapon to which the Antari have no answer. Their guns are with Korobirid in the south. For a quarter of an hour, the bombardment continues, a futile gesture in material terms. Despite the rare cannonball which finds itself driving through the body of an unlucky Antari peasant, it is at the Antari morale that each gun is truly aimed, an expression of superiority hammered home with every ball shot from a Tierran gun without even the faintest hint of challenge. Then the infantry go forward. They seem endless, a tide of orange jackets, white gaiters, and burnished steel, despite the fact that the reasoning part of you knows that there were twice as many of them at Blagia. In their steadily advancing ranks, they seem invincible, though you remember that each battalion is made up of men no more or less fragile than any other. Still, as you feel the ground shakes under the tread and the air filled with the cacophonous rattle of their drums, you find it so very easy to forget. Then, cutting through the rattle of the infantry's drums and the echoes of the guns, there comes the silvery peals of a bugle, the instrument through which the cavalry, and only the cavalry, is commanded. Your ears strain to hear the first triplet of notes, and then the next. Your mind translates music into words with a veteran ease. The command takes shape in your head. Your mouth goes dry, your hands tightening around the hilt of your saber. Cavalry on the left flank, advance at the charge. Cavalry on the right flank, advance at the charge. It is the order you have been waiting for. Squadron, you shout, drawing your blade from its scabbard. At the walk, advance. Even at the walk, it is not long before you find yourself passing the vast lines of infantry. Beyond the orange-jacketed masses, you see the leading squadron of the White Rose Lancers do the same, their sky-blue giddons held high as they close with a meager mob of Antari horse, already sallying from behind the earthworks. With every passing second, the two forces pick up speed, accelerating towards a terminal clash. A shout of alarm snaps your eyes away from the developing skirmish to your side. It seems you have more pressing matters. Ahead of you, a small band of horsemen peel away from the main body of the Antari, bound not for the developing melee on the other flank, but towards your own dragoons. They number no more than 36, but even less than 40 spirited horsemen could make no small amount of trouble, and enthusiasm is clearly something that these riders do not lack. their sabers already out and flashing in the summer sun. Their small, nimble horses carry them towards your dragoons faster and faster, making clear their desire to charge home. There's no going around them, that is certain. They're already extending into a thin line, wide enough to make any detour impossible. Now you will have to fight through them. The question is how. You could certainly ride right through them. If you were simply to use the weight of your numbers to pull through, you'd be in contact with the enemy for only a few moments before brushing them aside. You'd risk only a few losses, but that would also leave the enemy horsemen free to make mischief among the friendly infantry now passing behind you. Taking the time to come to grips with the enemy and rout them comprehensively presents its own problems. Whether by saber, by carbine, or by clever maneuver, defeating the enemy horse would take time, a luxury which your order does not provide you in great abundance. The enemy cavalry are 300 paces away and closing. The squadron pounds towards them at the jog trot. How will you meet them? Let's see. We shall ride right through them. I'll lure the enemy into their own destruction. We can stalk them with a good volley or two, but we shall meet them with the saber and smash them quickly. I think a good volley or two will probably do it. They'll probably end up running away or something like that. Squadron, you shout. Halt and make ready for volley fire. There is a risk to what you plan to do. Your squadron must be on steady horses to deliver a volley with anything which might be described as accuracy, and you can think of no more disadvantageous way to meet an enemy cavalry charge than by standing still. You will need to break the enemy with a volley before they can close. A simple thing, if enough of your men are able to keep steady atop their shifting saddles and hit the enemy. If the Antari are at 100 paces, close enough for you to lather streaming down their horses' necks. Squadron, present around you the men. Squadron, present around you the men of your command bring their short-barreled carbines to bear. 80 paces now. 60, 40, fire! There is a single moment of thunder, fire, and smoke as all around you the men of your squadron unload their carbines into the enemy. Your hand closes around the hilt of your the hilt of your sword as you peer on into the powder fog, preparing yourself to meet those of the enemy who have survived your volley. They do not come. When the smoke blows away in the summer breeze, it reveals that the ground before you is covered with naught but shattered men and broken horses. The surviving Antari are already beating a hasty retreat. You order a pursuit without delay. You've wasted enough time with this skirmish. Now you shall have to make haste to fulfill your orders before it's too late. Okay, we did defeat them though, so there's that. Morale is low. Loyalty is still at 50, but the discipline is high. So we're doing okay. But I do need to get that morale up at some point. I don't know how, but I would like to. You can now see the Antari camp defenses in detail as you lead your squadron towards them. They are no more than a sloped berm of packed earth, perhaps waist high. But the standards of your own army's military engineering, it is positively laughable. No stakes to fend off cavalry attacks, no ditch to slow down infantry, not even bastions to make use of flanking fire. Quite frankly, by itself, it is little obstacle at all. You have confidence that even a mediocre equestrian could vault a horse over it with ease. No, the problem lies with the men still defending it. There are not many of them. You count no more than 20 directly before you, but even at 250 paces, you can see the long, slim shapes of muskets in their hands. They bring their weapons to bear with something only a coffee house comedian would dare call good drill, but they bring them to bear nonetheless. 200 paces away now, and the Antari at the earthen parapet wait for you to close into the range, the sun flashing off the barrels of their mismatched guns. They may not be anything close to disciplined line infantry, but a musket ball fired by a peasant will kill a man just as well as one fired by a grenadier, and a charging squadron of cavalry is a damned hard target to miss at close range. 150 paces. You could try to ride around them, but that would cost you valuable time. You could try to rattle their nerves, make them break, or you could ride right into the teeth of the enemy's volley, swallow the inevitable loss of a few men, and risk no more of your precious time. Let's see. We'll tough it out. The enemy volley and ride through. Let us see if I cannot rattle their nerves. We make a detour. Better to lose time than to lose men. I have a plan, one that will lose us neither men nor time. Okay, I'm kind of curious. Do I have enough intellect to pull this off? I'm gonna assume that this is an intellect thing here. So let's try it. The thought comes to you as the defeated remnants of the Antari cavalry speed on ahead of you. If you were able to block up the Antari infantry's field of fire, you could ride right up to them and put them to flight with the saber. It would be the simplest thing, and all it would require is an appropriate obstruction, like a gaggle of fleeing Antari cavalry. Squadron, keep at the tails of those Antari horsemen, but do not overtake them, you command. Forward at the gallop. Just like that, your dragoons close the distance with the fleeing Antari cavalry until you are so close behind that you feel as if you could practically reach out with your saber and slice off the bounding tail of the rearmost stragglers. The distance closes, and the Antari peasant infantry, so inured to the idea of seeing anyone upon a horse as superior to them, dare not fire upon you for fear of hitting their own cavalry. 50 paces, 40, 30. If those musketeers were to open fire now, the result would be devastating. Yet they do no such thing. Instead, when it becomes clear that they are soon to be within reach of your Tieran sabers, they throw down their arms and abandon their position, fleeing in all directions. You allow the surviving Antari horsemen to flee to safety as you lead your dragoons through the last enemy line of defense without a single man lost or a single shot fired. Their purpose is served. Now you must see to your own. Okay, nice. So that worked out pretty well. But does this help my morale or anything? Doesn't look like it does. The squadron is already riding deep into the enclosed space of the Antari camp as the rattle of musketry echoes from behind you. Battalion volleys melding together into a rising tide of lead and fire. The main body of the king's army has joined the battle. Far to your left, you can see the shattered remnants of the main force of the Antari cavalry, fleeing. You had charged into battle with sabers high and voices raised in ferocity, yet the fighting spirit of the Antari could not match Tieran drill and Tieran numbers. Even before the infantry battle in the center could properly begin, the cavalry battle on both flanks had already ended in Tieran victory. Ahead, you see your objective, the low shapes of the ferry barges of the river, not 300 paces away now. The only thing that lie in your path are the disordered ranks of the tents which had served to house the small and scrawny force which is already meeting its destruction behind you. That does not mean the success of your mission is no longer imperiled. Human shapes clamber over the barges, working at moorings and ropes. It is clear they mean to cut the ferries free from crossing line and escape downstream. You order the men to follow you through the camp with the utmost haste, but not all of them listen. The looting of a defeated opponent's camp and baggage is a matter of course for a victorious army, but some of your men are not waiting for victory. Even as you try to lead the rest towards the riverbank, some are peeling off or dismounting to sift through the tents and supply carts, flinging back canvas covers in search of coin, trophies, and women. It is a breakdown of discipline for sure. Your own men abandoning you for plunder before the assembled eyes of the king's division. But will you spend precious time to restore discipline? Will you place the mission above your reputation? Or will you discard both? Your dragoons are the first into the enemy's camp, so you have first pick of plunder. Not since the fall of Caringia have you been presented such an opportunity to fill your own pockets. Will you take it? Let's see here. I'll deal with the looters later. My orders come first. Discipline comes first. Get the looters back in line before proceeding. Threaten to shoot any man who deserts his post to plunder. The battle is all but won. Surely I might look into my own financial welfare. My own financial welfare is okay at the moment, so I don't think I have to worry about that. And I might be richer beyond my wildest dreams, depending on how certain things work out. But discipline comes first. Get the looters back in line before proceeding. Plus, I kind of need the help to my reputation. You order the squadron to a halt as you wheel Thunderer about. The first duty of any king's officer is the maintenance of maintenance of discipline within his command. It is an obligation which supersedes even your battle orders. Dragoons, you command, back in ranks. For some of the fugitives, your attention is enough to get them back in the saddle. As for the remainder, you resort to stronger language. Damn your eyes, dragoons, you shout. His Majesty commands this army, and he is watching. Do you know what he sees? You fling your arm towards the infantry battle still raging behind you. He sees his foot struggling mightily against the enemy's infantry. You shift your hand to the right. He sees his lancers thrash the enemy horse. You shift your hand again, this time to point accusatorily at the ill-disciplined men. Then he sees you, dragoons. He sees you plundering and stuffing your pockets while his orders remains unfulfilled. While the rest of his armies fight, you loot. While they die, you carouse. What shame he must feel in seeing us fail him so. To invoke the royal gaze is no light matter, but you suppose that given the circumstances, your slight lèse majesté could be excused. Your would-be looters are cowed. When you order them back in ranks, you do not have to repeat yourself yet again. The Antari have barely even begun cutting loose the ferries when you burst out of the camp at the head of your dragoons. Saber out, you spur your mount into a charge with your squadron at your back. The Antari bargemen, armed only with knives and hatchets, quickly decide against mounting any sort of resistance. Before your men can get close, they are throwing down whatever is in their hands and fleeing down the side of the riverbank, leaving the barges undefended. By the time your men secure the ferries and their mysterious cargo, the battle is all but over. In the distance, you can see the Antari infantry fleeing in all directions as ranks of orange-clad Tierran infantry pursue them with charged bayonets. As for the enemy cavalry, they are long gone. The only fighting men ahorse nearby, aside from your own, are those of the White Rose Lancers, their white jacket now splattered with filth and their lance points dripping with blood. Even as most of the Warburtonian regiment hunts down the fleeing enemy, another troop heads for your dragoons. The officer who leads them wears a uniform unsullied by battle. A staff galloper. Daring stuff, that, the captain in charge comments as he brings his charger to a halt before you. We saw it all. Smartly done, he declares as he grins broadly under the wax points of his mustache. Almost as quick as lancers, you fellows. You smile back. From a man such as this, you're not going to get a much greater compliment than that. His Majesty sends his compliments and his congratulations. The lancer continues. We're to serve as your relief. The king has ordered your men set at liberty to salvage. Ah yes, salvage, which is to say, loot the Antari camp. The men behind you barely wait for your confirmation before heading off. And why should they? Your orders have been fulfilled, and the enemy is beaten. You have won for yourself and your regiment glory and the high regard of your sovereign. The battle is won. Okay, so we did well. Didn't have any issues there in that battle. It seemed like a simple thing, and I didn't even need to wear my armor or anything like that. So the next afternoon, you are supervising the billeting of some of your squadron's horses at a stable near the outer edges of town when you are approached by a lieutenant in the burnt orange jacket of the line infantry. Captain Drakon of the Dragoons, he asks as he steps into the cool shade of the half-enclosed stable. You nod. Your servant, sir. You reply. The infantry officer snaps off a quick salute. Lieutenant Stanhope, sir, 11th of Foot. The king has seen fit to give us the duty of guarding the prisoners taken in yesterday's action. Is there anything you require of me? You ask. The more junior officer nods. I currently have the honor of maintaining under guard the commanding officer of the Antari force we fought yesterday. He has asked after you, by name, and has requested a meeting. I came to beg a reply. An Antari nobleman asking after you. Surely you have no personal acquaintance with any Antari nobleman. What in creation could he want with you? Yeah, that's a bit interesting. Unless it's the one from, oh god, the one from Sabers of Infinity. Because, yeah, we did let him off the hook. So maybe it's him? I do not see why an Antari Lord would ask after me. Stanhope's eyebrow rises. You insist that you have no personal acquaintance with such a fellow. None at all? You shake your head. None at all, sir, you reply, perhaps a little too firmly. The infantry officer frowns in puzzlement. That is indeed quite strange. He certainly insists that he knows you. Well, I guess we can just go ahead and see who it is, but I think it might be that guy. Within minutes, Lieutenant Stanhope is leading you towards the center of town where the prisoners of war are being held. Soon you begin passing by strings of men sitting despondently along the side of the street. They rest in close clumps of 10 or 12, and as you take a closer look, it becomes clear why. The members of each group are tied to each other by the hand with thick ropes. Each of the captives possesses the light skin and fair hair of the Antari, and each of them wears clothes fouled by the black stains of gunpowder or the brown of dried blood. Their rough clothing marks them out as serf soldiers, captured by the hundred in the pursuit following yesterday's battle. Under the watchful eye of armed tier and infantry, they sit exposed to the summer sun, looking thoroughly miserable. Stanhope takes you across a square full of such wretched figures, then towards an elegant set of townhouses at one corner. Here are kept prisoners of a rather different quality, vain-blooded lords awaiting ransom. It soon becomes clear that these prisoners are subject to little discomfort. In the drawing room, a pair of noble-born prisoners chat over a pot of coffee, while in the dining room, yet more captives tuck into a late dinner of honey-roasted pork and potato wine. Only the presence of a pair of guards in the antechamber gives off anything of the air of a prison cell. It seems that the king's army has not stooped to such barbaric levels as to require nobles of the blood to share the same indignities as common men, not even in captivity. You would think they would turn around and let them suffer, but, all right, whatever. The infantry officer leads you up the stairs, towards a set of doors attended by another pair of guards. The quarters of the gentleman who asked for you are right through this door, Stanhope tells you. Do not mind the guards, though. Though he has made no attempts at escape, I am told that it took nearly 20 men to subdue him. I suppose the precautions necessary. Without another word, the officer nods to the guards. As one, they push open the double doors and allow you through. The room, like the rest of the house, has been lavishly appointed. A large four-poster bed sits on one end, a writing desk and an iron stove at the other. Its sole occupant sits in the middle, resting in one of 3 cushioned armchairs arranged around a sitting table. He is nearing middle age now, the man in the chair, but his streaming mustachios, his long blonde hair, and the muscular frame underneath his hussar's jackets makes him instantly recognizable. Yes, you've met this man before, though it had been only briefly and a long time ago, on a bridge along the River Carron in the first winter of the war. Ah, Drakon, rumbles the deep voice of Carol of Locke. It is good to see that you are well. Oh, okay, so him. I forgot about him. The very first person I fought, but all right. In truth, the Antari nobleman relates to you over tea. I am rather glad to see you well, despite. He waves a massive hand towards the guards at the door. The circumstances. Lord Carol's Tieran is more fluent now, his accent less pronounced. You have my sympathies regarding the current circumstances, sir, you reply politely, even if I do not quite share your opinion of them. The Antari manages a sour smile. Indeed, and why should you? Your king has just won a great victory and advances deeper into my homeland. Your own fortune seems to be on the rise as well. I hear that you are some sort of senior officer now. A captain? You nod. Yes, that's right. You have certainly advanced far since our last encounter, he remarks, as if a headmaster commenting on the progress of a favorite pupil. A mere cornet barely out of your Captain Hunter's shadow. A pause and a look of confusion now. If I may be so bold, might I ask where Hunter is now? His regiment is with this army, is it not? Yet I have not seen, I have seen, yet I have seen or heard nothing of him. Then he does not know. Hunter is dead, you reply heavily. He was killed when his battalion was overrun at Blogia. Lord Carroll shakes his head sadly. I see. Pity. He will not be forgotten, you reply steadily. He will be seen as a saint of the red if I have anything to do with it. The Antari nods approvingly. I do not doubt that the Mother of Ascension has already called him to sainthood, but I appreciate your sentiments nonetheless. Okay, so now we have a chance to chat with him. Interesting. There are options here. Why would you grieve so at the death of an enemy? I must present to you my compliments. You fought well. Shall you be ransomed soon? If you excuse me, I believe we are finished here. I am a little curious about why did he grieve over the death of an enemy, but he seems like an honorable sort, so let's see. An enemy? Lord Carroll replies pensively. No, he was not my enemy. That would have to imply some level of enmity or anger. He shakes his head. Sir Enrique was a man who wore the uniform of a country at war with mine. That did not make him my enemy, only my adversary. He killed your men, you point out. He captured you personally. The Antari nods. He did, because it was his duty as a servant of his liege and as a soldier. It was a duty he carried out with gallantry and skill, and when it was done, he never once saw his duty as an excuse to extend us the slightest discourtesy. Lord Carroll sighs. Creation is poor for the absence of such a man. Is that not reason enough to grieve? You nod, and for a moment, the two of you share a moment of commiseration for the loss of such a courageous soldier and such a good man. Yes, you suppose it is. I mean, that's true. I do miss Hunter. Hunter seemed like a good guy. I didn't think he would die so soon. Shall you be ransomed soon? Lord Carroll shakes his head. I do not think I shall be ransomed at all. Prince Corbett does not often forgive failure, and now I have failed him twice. Then what will you do? The Antari sighs. My parents are dead. I've never married. Locke was never good land to begin with, and surely Corbett will find some way to take it from me, which leaves me nothing but my pride and my honor. Still something, at least. He shrugs. Perhaps I will see this tiara of yours once the war is over. If it made men like Hunter, it cannot be as bad as a place as they say. Should you want for employment, you may inquire after me when this war ends. Interesting. I wish you the best of luck. Given the circumstances, your predicament is exactly what you deserve. I don't hate the guy. I don't hate the Antari. Sure, I'll see this. Maybe we'll run into him in Lords of Infinity. Maybe he can help me out or something. So, should you want for employment, you may inquire after me when this war ends. You could think of 1,000 places within a noble household for a Bane-blooded soldier, even a foreign one, a master of arms, a commander of the House Guard, a confidential messenger, perhaps. Lord Carroll nods. Perhaps I shall, he replies, keeping his emotions closely guarded. Yes, perhaps I shall if this war ever ends. After that, there seems little for the two of you to talk about. Speaking of the uncertain future, has placed the Antari in a mood more fit for introspection than conversation. It is clear to you that this meeting is over. You say your farewells and excuse yourself, leaving Lord Carroll alone with his thoughts. Okay. So we've given him a bit of an out, so maybe we will see him later on. Maybe he can serve my family, and who knows? Might be helping a battle or something like that. Seemed like he was pretty strong. Your stay in Milanoval proved significantly more comfortable than the weeks you spent in Solokoval. For one thing, the king's new base has been a considerably larger town before the war, and serving as Prince Corbeard's field headquarters for 2 years had only caused it to grow further. The summer heat is significantly less tiresome as well, not because of any matter of location, For Milanovo is barely 30 kilometers to the north of Solikovo, but because the town is bounded on three sides by the cool waters of the River Karen, and on the fourth by a not insubstantial belt of trees, perhaps the last northern vestige of the Great Forest. It is the presence of this forest which seems to be the new focus of the army's efforts. For every day, companies of foot march out into the trees armed with hatchets and saws. They return with carts full of newly felled logs to be piled in the town square, cut into planks by yet more companies of infantry, and set to dry in the hot summer air. Though your dragoons are still required to patrol in search of any approaching enemy force, no longer are they required to keep the obsessive watch that had so fatigued them earlier in the summer. Now is a rare occasion when any more than 1 out of 8 of your men are posted as vedettes at any given times. To your dragoons, it is practically a vacation. Liberty in well-provisioned and well-established town does nothing but good for their spirits. You too are no longer worked to exhaustion every day. Your duties seem to have been pared back to handling 1 or 2 patrols a week and dealing with the occasional breaches of discipline which come almost naturally to any group of young, fit, and courageous men with too much time on their hand. In fact, once the patrols are cut back further with the end of the campaigning season and the onset of the autumn rains, you find yourself with barely any work at all and a great deal of free time. How do you plan to spend it? I can learn the Antari language. That probably would have helped if I actually started on it. I haven't worked on my memoirs in a while. I'll use the time to oversee the development of one of my lieutenants. I've worked with all my lieutenants, and I feel like since I've worked with all of them and I even got an achievement for them, I probably don't need to do that again. And I don't really have any personal acquaintances, so let's work on these memoirs. With more free time than you have had in a very long while, you take the opportunity to work on your memoirs further over the next few months. It is with a determined will that you return to the much dreaded process of editing your work, working 2 weeks at a time, with days of rest in between to preserve both your alertness and your sanity. You examine and revise and rewrite, good lord, page after page as the days get shorter and colder. When you at last finish going over the last of your draft chapters at the end of autumn, you celebrate the temporary end to your drudgery with a long period of rest. You do not pick up your pen to begin a new chapter until a day after the first snow of winter. Even with so much free time, progress is slow. The words don't come to you as easily as they should. After a month, you only manage to put out another 20 pages. Some days you can barely set a single sentence to paper. Then, however, you have greater problems to worry about. It first comes to your attention on the morning of the first Monday of OIE 611. As with the first Monday of every month spent in garrison, you call out the entire strength of your squadron so that they may be paraded and expected in the open. When the 5 troops under your command file under the square you were allowed for the purpose of your review, you note that your force seems rather smaller than it should be. At first, you think it a trick of the winter. The day is a cold and blustery one, and the snow makes it difficult to see. However, when Lanzarote takes roll call, your suspicions are confirmed. Nearly a third of the men who should be present are missing. Corporal, it seems to me that a great number of my men are missing, you remark neutrally to Marion as your staff sergeant finishes working down the roster. Might you have some idea as to why? They're probably ill, sir, Marion replies. Frostbite, the shivers, putrid extremities. Exactly what you might expect given the extreme circumstances. Circumstances, you ask? What circumstances? Firewood rations for enlisted men were halved last week, sir, your Batman reports. No change to officer allocations, of course, which is likely why you have not noticed. No wonder so many of your men are sick. While half rations of fuel would keep your men from freezing to death in their own barracks, it would make them much more susceptible to winter illness, the sort of illness that make men lose fingers and limbs, and the sort which can reduce even the healthiest and best prepared unit into a gaggle of amputees and invalids. Bloody martyr. I do not see how this is a concern, Sandra remarks when you call him and your other officers to an emergency staff meeting and explain the problem. Could we not simply gather some hatchets and allow the men to cut their own firewood from the trees outside of town? Have you ever been outside of town these past 3 months? Blaylock replies incredulously. The infantry cut down all the bloody trees. There's barely enough wood left standing out there to light a candle, let alone a stove. Sandero scratches his head in confusion. Trees do not vanish into thin air simply because they have been cut down. The timber must have gone somewhere. It's still here in Milanoval, Lord Renner says. I know a fellow on Castermain's staff, betrothed to me cousin he is. The wood's all cut and stacked and seasoned in a set of guarded warehouses by the river, says he. Blaylock leans in expectantly. This fellow of yours. I don't suppose he'd be willing to give us some of that lumber for firewood, would he? The young lordling shakes his head. The wood's reserved for a higher purpose, says he. Ain't even Castermains know what. I ain't much chance of convincing him. Saints be damned, Blaylock growls. I bet if the colonel were here, he'd be able to talk some sense into the fellow. Lord Reynard nods in agreement. I wish he were, most likely more than you do, but he ain't. No, the Duke of Canaris isn't here, but the next best thing is. As a captain with a heroic reputation, you get a lot further than a lieutenant trading upon a illustrious father's name. Perhaps you could see this fellow on your subordinate's behalf. If we cannot obtain fuel without compromising our honor, then our men must endure. Surely there must be fuel for purchase somewhere. Introduce me to this fellow, Lieutenant. I might be able to talk him around. I don't know if my charm is good enough, but I mean, maybe I could use my reputation as a lovely hero and stuff. It is quite remarkable the effect that war has had on the subtleties of Tierran society. A decade ago, it would have been you asking for your more highly born subordinate's help in such a matter. After all, Lord Reynard is heir to a dukedom, while your family estates are barely worthy of the name. Yet now, a gentleman who had already balked at the idea of aiding Canaris' son is all smiles, and I shall see what I can do for a hero of Bloshia, a knight of the red, and a man seen to be on the cusp of the king's favor. He is as good as his word. The fuel arrives in covered wagons the next night. You see it distributed by morning. To say that your men are thankful would be an understatement. The fuel you secure them is not quite enough to bring them up to their full ration, but it is sufficient to keep them warm and dry through the winter. They show their appreciation in small ways, quicker salutes, friendlier faces, and once a dragoon gesturing to you for the benefit of an infantryman with the distinct motions which could only be accompanied by the words, "That's him, our fellow." Even so, the winter is hard. Men still fall sick, though none die, and many of your dragoons show up to inspections coughing and shivering. It is a relief when the first signs of the spring thaw come. At last it's almost over, and at last you see the reason for which the king has been compelled to allow his own army to freeze through the winter. Yeah, what did he come up with? Okay, so the morale got a bit higher. Loyalty has gotten a bit higher. Our discipline is still the same. Barges. You begin seeing them take shape on the riverside even before the banks of the Carron are free of winter ice. Once again, it is the men of the infantry made to do the heavy lifting. They work in teams, assembling each section before fitting them together into the sort of shallow-hulled, flat-bottomed watercraft so common on Tierran rivers, yet all but unknown in Antari. Construction proceeds at a rapid pace. Within a week of the first frame being laid, the first set of hulls are being caulked. By then, there are dozens of them, each fit to carry 100 infantrymen, if not more, enough to carry every Tierran in Milanoval if needed. Perhaps that is what the king plans. It is on the day that the first barges are launched into the Carron that you find out for sure. That afternoon, Marion hands you a set of sealed orders from the king's staff. Your squadron has been ordered to make themselves ready for action. All extraneous trappings and accoutrements are to be discarded, and all weapons and uniforms are to be inspected. Your dragoons, in particular, are to see their horses are properly prepared for shipment by boat. To you, it seems as if the final day of reckoning is soon to be at hand. The only question is, when? For the next few days, Milanovo is in a state of constant activity as the king's division prepares itself for yet another year of campaigning. The squares are filled with companies of foot and troops of cavalry doing final inspections. The streets are crammed with carts piled high with ammunition crates, bags of hardtack, and beef rations. The little snow that remains on the ground is trampled into brown slush by the passing thousands of boots. By the end of the week, all is in readiness. The last inspection made, the last too heavy bit of loot disposed of, the last flint fitted, and the last saber sharpened. Even the camp followers and soldiers' wives have been made ready for travel. The king's division is prepared down to the last gaiter button. Still, the barges remain moored along the riverbank, only a few loaded and only with the heaviest cargo, cannon, furniture, and the massive crates which your dragoons had taken during the capture of the town last summer. As for the rest, they sit empty, riding easily along the shallow banks of the Carron, waiting for something. 3 days later, you see what. It first comes an hour after dawn as a vast gurgling wave, a surge of cold, newly melted water cascading down the course of the river like a stampede of wild horses. Though the winter snow in the lower parts of southern Antari melted away days ago, it is only now that the vast snowbanks of the foothills upstream have finally succumbed to the coming warmth of spring. It is the melt from these hills that transforms the Carron from a shallow and rapid constricted river to an immense waterway. By sunset, the river has risen by half the height of a man. The docks are almost swamped. That night, the king's division is finally ordered to board the barges. By late morning, the next day, there are no more men or supplies left on the docks. The whole of the king's forces are aboard the vast riverine armada, save a squadron of lancers and the king's own 1st Battalion, Grenadier Guards, whom you must assume are remaining to hold the city. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the orders are finally given to cast off. Like leaves in a stream, the swollen current carries you and your dragoons south, towards Havenport, towards Caringia, towards Prince Corabird. All right, and then now we have chapter 10, wherein the cavalry officer fights in a great battle. So this will be a bit of a shorter episode, as we've basically gotten to the climax of this. And in the next episode, I assume it's going to be the last episode, since we're going to have this huge battle to deal with. And that will be pretty much the end of Guns of Infinity. And then after that, we will take a look at Lords of Infinity, or at least the beta for Lords of Infinity. I'll play the full game when it comes out. But yeah, we'll take a look at the demo for it. But if you like the video, if you want to see more content like this, subscribe. I have a lot of things on the channel, and I will have many other things in the future. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave them in the comment section. Also, I forgot to mention this in the other videos. If there have been a bit of a delay in certain responses or certain results of certain responses, I've recorded a lot of videos in one day. So that's the reason why you probably haven't seen certain changes, whether they be certain critiques of pronunciations of words or just certain things like that. You know, again, I recorded, I think this is the 4th video that I've recorded today. So, or maybe the 5th actually, because there's some other things I've recorded. Don't know when they'll come out, but I've recorded those as well. But yeah, so that might be the reason why you don't see certain changes. I didn't mention that in the other videos. I kind of forgot about it. But yeah, this is going to be a bit of a shorter video. And in the last video, we will wrap up Guns of Infinity once and for all. So see you in the next one. See ya.